Hashem, Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Sanhedrin, Kufiyud Beis, and we are on Kufiyud Aleph from the Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. So today's Daf is dedicated for Shmir for the Chayalim, it's all for the Shvuyim and the Yeshua for Am Yisrael. In Mar, we learned Rabbi Yochanan and Omar. We're talking about the context is in Ir Nidachas. And Ir Nidachas is a city where the majority of the people have committed idolatry, and so then the city, all the money of the city is burnt, and all the people who worshipped idolatry are decapitated. They're sayif. Whereas if they had just done idolatry as individuals, then their money is saved, but they are stoned to death. So in my Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan gives a general teaching. Cholkin Yerachas l'shnei shvatim. We could take, if there's one city, it could be divided amongst two tribes. Whereas Reish Lakish Amar, Ein Cholkin Yerachas l'shnei shvatim. We don't divide one city into two tribes. So Eitzei Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, so he challenges them from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Achiu Madicha me osa year. It cannot become an Ir Nidachas unless the people who were the subverters who led the community astray were from that same city, from the bottom of 111b, the bottom of 111b. Okay? You okay?
Yeah.
So unless the people were from the same city and from the same tribe, so my love, so it means to say, so doesn't it mean to say, even though, so Rabbi Yochanan says for Reish Lakish that says in our Mishnah, become a subverter even unless they are from the same city and from the same tribe. So what does that mean? Says Rabbi Yochanan, doesn't it mean that they not only have to be from the same city, but they also have to be from the same tribe? And so don't we learn from here, isn't this a proof that you can divide the city into two different tribes, because it's possible to be from the same city and yet from a different tribe? And says, no, there's another way that you could be, it's not that you divide the city, but the person can be from a different tribe and live in that city. Did not pull up Yerusha because he got it as an inheritance. Or else somebody gave it to him as a gift. Now says the Gemara, well, another attempt to prove Rabbi Yochanan is correct. It says in the pasuk in Yoshua, Arim Teisha Me'et Shnei Ashvatim, that there were 9 cities from the 2 tribes of Judah and Shimon. Me'et Shnei Ashvatim Ha'ela. Now, what does it mean 9 cities from 2 tribes? My love, we're talking about a case, Arbo Pagamehai, that each tribe had 4.5 cities. We see that they shared one of the cities, so that you could have 2 tribes in one city. Gemara says, no, no, it's 4 from one and 5 from the other. If that's the case, it should say 4 from one and 5 from the other. So why did it say 9 from 2? Gemara says, Kashi, it's a difficulty, but Rashi says it's not a tiyubta. Kashi is a lesser question, because you could have just explained that within the context of the relationship of Judah and Shimon in those days. Yibayu, on the top of 112a, the Gemara has the following question: let's say these subverters were not subverted by other people. The subverter, the city that subverted the Ir Nidachas, but they on their own they became subverters. Nobody pushed them. The Dichu Amar Rahman, I mean to say, the Torah says there needs to be somebody who subverts them, and not that they became subverted on their own. Or maybe even if they became subverted on their own. So that's the Gemara's question. So Tashmai Dichu Nashim Ukatanim, that if women or children subverted them, it does not become an Ir Nidachas. Now, don't we say? So the Gemara says if women or children subvert them, they don't become an Ir Nidachas. Amai. Why don't they become like an Ir Nidachas? Don't we want to say that it's like they were subverted on their own? And so therefore, don't we see from here that you became subverted on your own, you're not an Ir Nidachas? The Gemara said, no. Hanach basar nafshayo grade. Ani basar nashim v'katanim grade. No, there's a distinction if you follow yourself versus if you follow women or children. If you follow women or children, you might just be going along just to make them happy. And so therefore, you're not really deeply committed. And so therefore, it might not become an Ir Nidachas. But if you do it on your own, wow, that's going to be a deep commitment. So therefore, the Gemara did not answer this question. Good morning, Hobbs. We're on 112a, 6 lines on the top. It says, okay, next week, God willing, actually starting on Friday, and then on Chol Moed, we're going to do the daf at 7 a.m. a little later because it's a Chol Moed, so different schedule. So we'll do it every morning at 7 a.m. You could join me from the Zoom, and no matter where you are, we could connect all over the world. And plus, I'll post it, God willing, on the YouTube. So the Gemara says, Ad Yudach Rupa, you don't become Iranidach until the majority of the city becomes idolaters. But individually, once they become idolaters, they would already be chayiv. So the Gemara says, ask the question, how do we establish it as an Iranidachas? Amar Rav Yehuda, Danan v'chovshin. So Rav Yehuda says, now we come to, after we're studying this tractate for 111 days, Baruch Hashem, Siyata Dishma, we now come to the concept of a prison. So Rav Yehuda says you catch the person, you judge a person, and you put him in prison to wait to see if you're going to have a majority from the town and commit idolatry, and then you would give them sayif and not skila. Amar Ua, and that's no good. Nimtzat ma'ana is dinan. There's halacha you can't be ma'ana the din. You have to, if they're chayim misa, they have to execute them right away. You can't wait. You can't delay their judgment. So we judge them, we stone them until we get to the majority of the town, and then we start giving them sayif. Rashi says, we judge them until they get to the halfway. We assume that they're like individuals. So we judge them and stone them until we get to the halfway point, and then we start executing them. Now we have a third explanation. Rabbi Yochanan says we stone them, but Reish Lakish says no. We get a lot. We go to the law schools. We get a lot of judges that day, and we have a lot of courts being set up simultaneously, and that's how they all get judged on the same day. I mean, it must have been a small city, not a city like like New York, which has millions, but it must be like a small little city. Gemara says, is that the case? Any Ba'amar Rabbi Chama Bar Rabbi Yossi, Amar Rabbi Shai, Votzeta, Seisha, who, Os Aisha, he, Ish Isha, Tamotzi, Sharecha, Via Tamotzi, Kol Yor Sharecha. That we learned this earlier in our tractate. We don't do any Dachas in your regular town. It has to go to the Beis Din Agadol in Jerusalem. So you can't just execute them in your, well, you forget, Jeff, your classes. Good morning, Jeff. We should just have, Jeff, that would be a tremendous tova for the yeshiva. We should just have like 20 glasses right here on the table for everybody who comes in and forgets them. So the Gemara says that what should we do? So it says you have to take the Bezin Agadol. El Marbel Bate Dinin Umaynim Bidanan. So we have a lot of Bate Din, and we look at their case. We look at it carefully. Umaskina Lahu Bezin Agadol. And we take them up to the Bezin Agadol, the Gamer Dainayu. So we do the initial intake of the court proceedings. We do the gather the evidence, look at the cases, and then once we think we have enough, we don't adjudicate it yet. Once we think we have enough, we take them up to the Bezin Agadol in Jerusalem, and then we kill them. So basically, that's the concept. Now it says in the pasuk, so we're in 112a, around 1/3 of the way down. It says you have to strike down the people of the city, and you want to have a majority of the city. But how do we determine the majority of the people living there? But what about the fact that says the Brisa, Tanur Rabbanan, Achameres v'Gomeles, Averes v'Makom Umakom, Lanu b'Socha v'Hutchli Yuma, Im Nishtal Sham Shloshim Yom Heim b'Sayef L'Monon Avad, Pachas Mikan Heim b'Skil L'Monon Poet. So the Gemara says, let's say you have a donkey driver or a camel driver who's just basically passing through, and all of a sudden gets caught up in these idolaters. So if he did the idolatry with them, if he's there for 30 days, then he gets the sayif, like they are punished, and he loses his money, meaning he gets the decapitation. Well, let's say he's there for less than 30 days, then he gets judged as an individual, beskila, and his money is saved. So the Gemara says, is that really the case that 30 days is the threshold? For a mini, we have a brisa that says, what does the brisa say? Actually, it's not a brisa. This is a Mishnah Baba Basra. And when they determine who gives tzedakah, they used to collect from tzedakah. That it says Viramini. What does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, or how many days do you have to be in the city in order to be considered like you're part of the city? You're the Beis Chodesh. You have to be there 12 months, not 30 days. So how do we have this concept? One says 30 days, one says 12 days. So I'm a Rabbi Lokasha. Ho meheve mi b'nei masa. I'm meheve mi yosve ma'isa. Because it says haket hakes yoshvei ha'ir. So to be a yoshev ha'ir, it's 30 days. But to be a b'nei ha'ir, where you have to give the tzedakah, or you're obligated to give your share to the town's needs, to the poor, that is 12 months. The Gemara says Vatanya, and indeed, this Vatanya is benichusa. It's a supportive. Usually, Vatanya is a question. Vatanya, or in this case, is benichusa. It's the support. Amudar anami b'nei. Let's say you say, I'm not going to have any benefit from the people of the town. If there's a person who's there for 12 months, you can't have any benefit from him. But that's because you said mi b'nei here. If your vow is from the Bnei Ayah, but if your vow is from the Yoshvei Ayah, from those who dwell in the city, Nishtal Lamed Yom Asar. If he's there for 30 days, prohibited less than that. So there's the distinction between Bnei Ayah and Yoshvei Ayah. You burn it and everything in it. Tan Rabbanim. The pasuk says, the pasuk says, you destroy it and everything in it. You don't destroy the assets of the tzaddikim who are living there. They haven't done idolatry, and their assets are outside. They keep their assets in Zurich. So those assets are safe. The assets that are in the city are destroyed, but the assets that are in Zurich are safe. There's Kol Asher Ba. It says in the pasuk everything that's in it. But the tzaddikim's assets that are in the city are destroyed. So Allah, you destroy the assets of the town, but not if the assets belong to heaven, not if it's hektish. That's Kol Shalala. It says in the pasuk, all of the assets. There's Kol Shalala. That even if the wicked people have their assets, the ones who did idolatry, they have their assets in Zurich, you burn those assets as well. I'm Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon argues. He says, why does the Torah say the assets of the righteous that are within the town shall be destroyed? So what caused them to be living in that city? Their money, and so therefore their money is lost. So Rabbi Shimon, Rashi says that this is what's Rabbi Shimon coming here to add? So Rashi just says, "B'chol duchte darish Rabbi Shimon time of dekra." According to Rashi, Rabbi Shimon is not arguing, but what Rabbi Shimon does in every place is he gives the time of dekra that he's just trying to explain. But it seems that he's just agreeing. He's not arguing. Everybody agrees that the tzaddikim's assets are destroyed, but Rabbi Shimon is giving the explanation. Why the tzaddikim? They didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, they lived there. You shouldn't live with the wicked people. You shouldn't live in the same community with people who are not good. And so therefore they're going to lose their money. Because why did they try to live there? Because they want to make more money. They thought they'd be hobnobbing with the wealthy. And therefore they get some, money through osmosis. Amar Marvet Kol Shalatik boats. All of the shlala, all of its, the money of the city, you should gather into the town and destroy it. This comes to include the assets of the wicked that are outside the city. So I actually made a mistake earlier when I said that they burn the assets of the wicked who are in Switzerland. No, it's only those assets that are close by. They're outside the town, but they could close by and get there that same day. So if they're like adjacent to it, then you do it. But if it's on the other end of the world, it wouldn't be sufficient. You wouldn't have to burn it. Amrav Chlista, Pikdono Shalan Sheyayir. Okay, deposits. You know what a deposit is, Hobbs? Do we learn about that? So deposit is you take something today, we put it in a bank. There they used to give it to people. So let's say you have somebody put a deposit with these people of the Irni Dachas. Mutar. That's not burnt. That's permitted. So the Gemara says, Hey Chidami, what are we referring to? Ilema di Irachares. If you want to say that it's in a nut, that it's the deposits are from if you want to say that it's the deposits that are from a different town, the person doesn't live there, and this is why we need Rabbi Shimon's time in the He didn't live there. It's the Pikdonashal. So the ir acheres, and they put it in their pshita dimitar lav shlohu. It's obvious it's permitted. It's not the booty of the town. The eladidayu is no bir acheres. But if you want to say it's the wicked person's deposits and he just put it in another town, he didn't lotocha my matar. If it can be brought in, why is it permitted? He ain't lotocha. And if it can be gathered in, we already said it's prohibited. So the Gemara says, no, no, the deposit is belong to another city. And the mafkadei bisocha, and he deposited it in the ir nidachas. So why would we think it's destroyed? The people in the ir nidachas accepted responsibility for these deposits. And so therefore he might have said, well, since it's replaced, he has to pay back the money. So you might have said, you might have said it's like it belongs to the ir nidachas. Kamash one, that it's not like it belongs to the ir nidachas. So Amar Rav Krista, let's say you have an animal, and half the animal belongs to somebody who's from the Aronidachas, and the other half belongs to somebody from a different city, Asura. That animal, you can't have benefit from it, has to be destroyed. But Isa, let's say you have dough, you have a mound of dough, and half of this dough belongs to somebody in the Aronidachas, and the other half belongs to another city. Mutaris, that's going to be allowed to be permitted. That means to say the part that belongs to the person outside the Dachas can be permitted. My timer. Behema command the palgadamia, Isa command the palgadamia. This is also lumdish that the animal is something that's typically not split in half, and so we don't view it as though it's split. Whereas the dough is something that is meant to be split, and so therefore we view it as split, and so therefore the part that belongs to somebody outside the town is not burnt. By Rav Chisda, behema dachas mao de tisane be shlito tahara midei nevela. So it has to be burnt. That animal you can't have any benefit from. So let's say we have a law that if there's an animal that's a nevela, if it just dies on its own, then it makes you tamei if you touch it. But an animal that's slaughtered, it does not make you tamei. That's shlita, even though you can't eat it. Let's say it's treifa. So now the Gemara asks the question: let's say you have this animal that is supposed to be killed, but then you slaughter it. Does the slaughter help to take it away from a carcass? So the Gemara asks the question: do we say that it has to be basically killed by the sword? The animal has to be killed by the sword, and so therefore we view it as though it's killed by the sword, and it doesn't matter if it's slaughtered, it's still going to be mitame. And so that's the case. Oh, Dilma, perhaps keeping the shachta ma'anyo shlita, or maybe say since it's slaughtered, the slaughter helps to take it out of the status of a nevela. So the Gemara says take it, leave it unresolved. Ba Rabbi, yeah. Yeah, it could be that you're right, and it does sound familiar. I'm sorry that I'm forgetting it, but and I'm sure if we went into it more, we would see a bigger discussion of it. But the issue here is not whether it could be split, because you could clearly split up the animal, but rather the question is it something that's meant to be split, or it's supposed to be split? Like that's the normal course of it, which is what the dough is. Dough is normally split up. The animal is not normally split up. So yeah, there's the so that's why the Yad Ramah says that the distinction is that an animal while it's alive is not split, whereas the dough, so meaning since they have a partnership in a living animal, we don't assume it's going to be split. It's not the normal way. You can't split an animal if you have a partnership in a living animal, but as the dough, you can easily do it. So now the Gemara, but obviously that's a very good point, and we would discuss it in much greater depth if we have more time on this stuff. By Rav Yosef, Shior Nashim Tsikonios, excuse me, Stay or Nashim Tsikonios Mao. What about the hair of the women who are righteous, who are in that town? We say their possessions are destroyed. So do we have to destroy their hair? Amarava, what do you think the hair of the wicked woman is also? That's not prohibited. Take boats for the Saraptic sin that you gather into the town and you burn it. This reifa, that's only refers to objects that you just have to gather them in and burn it. But that comes to exclude hair which you're supposed to remove first and then gather and then burn it. So even the hair of the wicked woman are not burned. Amarava, but pay a nachris. No, we're talking about a wig. The wig, does that have to be burned? What's talking about? If it's attached to the body, then we're going to assume it's like the body, and so therefore it's not burned. So the Gemara says no. She took her wig when she got home. She hung it on the hook. Do we say do we say that this righteous woman's wig is viewed like the assets of the tzaddikim and it's destroyed? Or do we say since it's meant to be worn, it's like a garment, and then the assumption is that their garments are not burned. Their garments are not burned. And so it's like other garments and it's not burnt. Okay, so the Gemara leaves that question as teku. Of course, these questions of teku, we never had any or any dachas, and we never will, according to the majority opinion in Ben Sora or Moras. So therefore, I don't know that this will be the first question we'll ask Elio or Navi. It's not 100% relevant. You take all the assets into the city. If there is no rachov is like the street or this plaza where they gather things, then you do not become an irani dachas. That's Rabbi Shimon's position. Rabbi Kiva Omer ein la rachov, osin la rachov. But that doesn't have a rachov, you make a rachov. So what's the dispute? Maraslava rachova meikara, marasma marasava rachova ashram nami masra. Does the rachova imply initially they had a rachova, or even now they have to make a rachova? Do the sacred items that are in it can be redeemed. Tana Rabbanan, we're on top of 112b. Hayuba kachim is beach. So let's say you have there are two types of hectatious. There's hectatious that are kachim is beach. That's where you take a sheep and you say this sheep will be brought as a carbon. That's called kachim is beach. The sheep is supposed to be brought on the altar. Then there's kachim bedek abayis. We say this sheep is for or not your sheep. You take a different animal and say it's for the value of the temple, and so therefore you sell it and you take the money for the temple. So let's say you have kachim mizbeach yamutu. So if it's kachim that are designated for the altar, that should be put to death. You can't redeem it. So that's what the Brisa says. But if it is kachim bedek habayis, but let's say if it was something that is meant, let's say it's a horse or something, then you redeem it and you take the money and you give it to Beis Hamikdash. Utruma is your kavu. If it's truma, let's say it's food to the kohen. You have a bowl of wheat. You have to let it rot. Meiser sheni, and if it's meiser sheni, that's the secondary time that you have to eat in Jerusalem. The kisvei hakodesh and the sacred writings, iganzu. You have to bury it. Well, we're going to see. The Gemara is going to ask, how could you have kisvei hakodesh if there's even one mezuzah? This on tomorrow's daf, even one mezuzah would save an irani dachas. We'll see about that. Rabbi Shimon Omer behemta below behemes bechor or meiser. So Rabbi Shimon argues. He says it has to be the animal belongs to the irani dachas, but not the animal of a firstborn or a meiser behema. Shaloah, if it is its booty, prat l'kes of hektish, but you don't burn the money of hektish because of meiser. You don't burn because of hektish or meiser. So the Tanakama says that if it's kachim is be'achatais, kachim bedek habayis redeemed. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says that no, if it's behema of a bechor meiser, it's not burned, and if it's kes of hektish, it's not burnt. So the Gemara now analyzes this price. Amar bar, hayu bar, kachim is be'ach yamusu v'amai. Why does it have to die? Yamusu, amai yamusu. Yiru ad sheyistavu. Let it graze until it gets a blemish. V'yimachor, and then sell it v'yipu d'meil and a dava. And you take their money and use it as a voluntary offering. Why are we destroying the money of hektish that's in the irnei dachas? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar, zevach rishayim toeva. Rabbi Yochanan says we don't want anything to do with the idolaters. Zevach rishayim toeva. That since this is from the money that came from the animal that was an irnei dachas, we don't want to bring it on the mizbeach. We don't want anything to do with it. Rish Lakish Omar mamam balamhu. So Rish Lakish says no. Rish Lakish gives a different explanation. He says that we're not talking about the money of hektish, but really the money belongs to the owners. And what are we talking about here? Talking about kachim was an animal, but you said that you're going to be responsible He says, "Harei alai olah." He says, "I'm going to bring this male animal as an offering." And so then, if there's a damage to that animal, then he has to replace it. So it's the money of the owners. So therefore, that's what Rish Lakish says. Rabbi Shimon, he follows the position of Rabbi Shimon. It says, "Damar mamon ba'alon." The dispute in Bava Metzia that you probably remember, that whether or not this sacrificial animal which you have achrayus on, whether or not we say that it's the money of the owners. Rabbi Shimon says it's the money of the owners, therefore we burn it. Gemara says it can't be Rabbi Shimon. I mean, to say for Rabbi Shimon, for the fact that the second clause of the Mishnah of the Bryce is Rabbi Shimon, where he argues, it's obviously the case that the Reisha is not Rabbi Shimon. Reisha love Rabbi Shimon. So it must be, what are we talking about? One, it says kachim. There's two types of kachim. There's kachim and kachim kalim. Kachim is the most sacred animals, which have to be slaughtered in the Beit HaMikdash and eaten in the Beit HaMikdash only by the male Kohanim, and that's called the kachim, like the chatas and the asham. But then there's the kachikalim, which is a perfect example of kachikalim, is the Korban Pesach, which could be eaten by anybody in Jerusalem. So therefore, we're talking about a case of El Kachikalim, Liba de Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says Kachikalim Mamambalim. He says it's considered the owner money of the owners that we had in Baba Kama on Yud Beis, and so therefore it has to be destroyed. So the Gemara says, of a kachim, what will you do with kachim? Mipadu, you would redeem it, but now we have a problem. If that's the case, the kachim you redeem, but kachikalim are destroyed. Adatani Sefer, why is the bright to draw a distinction between kachim and kachim is be'ach and kachim bedek habayis? Adatani Sefer kachim bedek habayis yipadu. Why did they draw that distinction? They should draw a different distinction. When do we say that the animal dies because kachikalim? But if it's kachikachim, it should be redeemed. Meaning that's a closer distinction, and that's the distinction that the Brisa should have made. So the Gemara says no, they don't want to bring that distinction. No, because there is an animal which is called the chatas. Now, if the irni dachas owner dies, that's called the chatas, whose owner dies. So there it can't be replaced and it can't be redeemed. So there you just have to let it die. So not all kachikachim are going to be redeemed because there's a chatas that can't be redeemed. So therefore, the Gemara didn't want to give the Brisa didn't want to give this general rule. So Gemara says, okay, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, who says Zevach Rishayim Toeva, that we don't redeem the kachikachim. He says he doesn't want to say like Rish Lakish Zevach Rishayim Toeva. He says the sacrifice of the wicked or abomination. Now Rish Lakish, my time Alamak Rabbi Yochanan. Why does Rish Lakish say that we're talking about kachikalim? Why doesn't he give the explanation of Rabbi Yochanan? It says that we don't want to redeem the sacrifices of the wicked. He says no, it's too attenuated. When do we say this offerings of the wicked are an abomination? That's where they bring us their offerings directly. That we don't want. Here it turned from an animal into money. It was attenuated and it's okay. It was laundered, so to speak. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon says, that you burn your animals, but not the animals of a firstborn or a meiser. What are we talking about? If we're talking about a case where the animal is tamim, there's no moon on it, there's no blemish, that's the assets of the heaven. Ella b'bali mumin, you want to talk about the assets of an animal which has a blemish, then it's the assets that belong to the Yerni Dachas. So why do we say that it's not burnt? So Amar Avina, Olam b'bali mumin. So no, we're talking about an animal that has a blemish. And so still the case is Rabbi Shimon says it's not burnt. Why? When do we say we destroy the animals? If the animal is eaten typically as your animal, but these are eaten as a firstborn and a meiser behema, and so therefore it's not going to be burnt. The shalal shemayim minu, because he's going to be of the position, Shimon's of the position that's still considered to be the assets of heaven. And Shmuel says, and this argues with the position of Shmuel, who says what Rabbi Shimon means is everything is brought and everything is redeemed. Or what does he mean to say? Kol shekarav kishu tam, v'niftu kishu balmum, mishlala imay. Anything that is brought when it's a tam and redeemed when it's a blemish is going to be excluded from its booty. of the town. But anything that's brought while it's a tam, but is not redeemed when it's a balmum, but it's immediately permitted for a non-Kohen, you go in Bechor Meiser, like a firstborn animal in a Meiser, that if they had a blemish, that they're permitted for their owners without any redemption, even though. So then we say, even though there's no blemish, you don't exclude it from Shalala, but me Behema not. We go not from Behema when it says Behemta, but not the animal firstborn or Meiser. Okay, so this is today's daf, and we'll pick it up tomorrow, God willing, and finish the Masechta, God willing, on tomorrow's daf, and then the steam will be on Thursday morning, Baruch Hashem.
So